Good evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Tonight is Monday, September 22nd, 2014. This is the Canby Planning Commission meeting. It is 7 o'clock p.m. We are in City Council chambers. This meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 5. If you're watching and are interested, have a walk down here on a last nice day of the year, probably. The first item of business we always have is citizen input on non-agenda items. Is there anyone that would like to come to the microphone at this desk and just give us input on city planning matters other than that are on the agenda for tonight? Not seeing anyone, we will move to the next item of business, which is consideration of the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting from August 11th, 2014. Have all the commissioners had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Is there a motion with respect to the minutes? I was not at that meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting of August 11th.
Mr. Savory moves to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Hensley seconds. Is there any discussion about those minutes? Not hearing any discussion. All those in favor of approving those minutes as staff has presented them signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I heard 4 ayes. I did abstain. There can be no noes. Minutes are approved. Blow away. The next item of business is a public hearing. Tonight we will be considering a site and design review and conditional use permit from Verizon Wireless to construct a approximately 100-foot monopole with 12 8-foot panel antennas, with the tip of the antennas actually reaching a height of 104 feet. Ground equipment installed on a 22-foot by 3.5-foot concrete pad with a 30-kilowatt backup generator installed on a 10-foot by 5-foot concrete pad, all with a 50 by 50 lease area surrounding by a secure chain link fence. Let's just say it's DR 14-02, conditional use permit 14-01. With that said, that is a quasi-judicial public hearing. Therefore, I'm going to read the script without outlining some of the process and the rights that people have in today's public hearing. In the matter that's going to be before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please be prepared to step forward to the microphone at the appropriate time. State your name, mailing address, and interest in the matter. Please be sure to sign the testimony sheet. For those people other than the applicants that are interested in testifying, either as proponents or opponents, please sign in on the sheet at the front podium or speak up when we call for testimony. We have 4 interested speakers so far. We can take more. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation, and tonight we probably will, as we have some pro and con speakers for sure already. But generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each. The opponents will be given 5 minutes each, and those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have a final 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed to and through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access to become part of the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and all evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it's only to concur with prior testimony. So next we'll ask if there's any conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts. So first I'll ask, is there any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest? If so, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing in the present matter. Any conflicts of interest?
None.
No conflicts of interest exist. Are there any ex parte contacts? If there have been, has any member of this body had any ex parte contacts with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site? If so, please declare the nature and the extent of such contact at this time.
I drove by the site a couple of times, not on purpose to see that, but on my way to the skate park or to the police station, so I know where it
Bailing
is.
yourself out of jail.
Bailing myself out of jail.
Why do you go to the skate park?
That's how I got in jail.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saber.
Guilty of being old and in the way.
Okay, back to the serious nature of this. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts? Thank you for indulging our entertainment up here. So the public hearing format, the public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, we'll have a brief staff report. Then we'll have questions from the commissioners to staff. Then we will open the public hearing for testimony from the public. The applicant will have a maximum of 15 minutes. Other proponents can have up to 5 minutes each. Opponents will have up to 5 minutes each. And any party speaking neutral will have 5 minutes each. Then the applicant will have a 10-minute rebuttal. Then we will close public testimony. We may ask questions, any follow-up questions to the staff. Then we will close the questions and discuss and deliberate amongst the body, and then we will make a final decision. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure for tonight's public hearing? That said, we will move to the presentation of the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Chair Smith and Planning Commissioners. Welcome this evening. I've got the record laying on the dais in front of you with the hard copy file, and we have a set of full-size prints that was provided by the applicant, and we do have a couple representatives in the audience tonight that are representing this application, as well as the citizens that have come to hear this. As you indicated on the agenda, that we're reviewing both a site and design review and a conditional use permit. And there's a few nuances in the cell phone tower ordinance that talks about preferred locations for cell towers within zone districts in the city. And if you move towards a preferred site, the ordinance is set up in a manner that it's easier to gain approval when you're closer to a preferred location. And this particular site is actually in the preferred zone. This is just a picture of what it might simulate and look like. But as you can see, we're in an industrial zone, a light industrial zone district portion of town in the northwest corner. And when you're in a preferred site and you have a cell phone tower that is less than 100 feet tall and is at least 660 feet away from the nearest residential zone, then all they would have to do is gain a building permit. There wouldn't be a public hearing and a review. And reading the ordinance several times, because it is a little bit confusing, but actually, if they were to lower this pole to less than 100 feet, it's now proposed at 104 with the antennas, they would not need the conditional use permit. And then it's this fact that it's within the 660 feet of the residential zone that has the site and design review requirement that kicks in. So those are just a couple of the nuances that I think are relevant as you go through and review this. Cell towers are a necessity in today's environment. They're guided by the FCC and all of their rules, Communications Act. I always forget whether it was 91 or 96, whenever that thing was passed. And they do have to comply with FCC rules. I think they also demand approval through what radio signals they're going to be using. And the applicant did submit several sheets that were indicated to be related to FCC approval of the radio signals, but actually looking through those, they had all sorts of cities all around us. I never did find Canby in there. It wasn't a concern. I was just noting they had submitted that with the idea of showing us that the FCC had looked at the radio signals, and I can't see Canby listed in that. They're not going to get their broadcasting approval without the FCC, so I guess I'm not that concerned about that. The area I mentioned was in a light industrial zone, and for the citizens and the neighbors that live nearby, the most important thing to them is probably what is this thing going to look like. And so the applicant did provide 4 photo shots from differing viewpoints, and actually required by the code to do that. And this particular one is looking basically almost from the river's edge, because this property goes up to the drop-off down to the Malala River, looking back almost to downtown Canby, towards not quite the police department, but a little bit more downtown. And so that's in the rear yard of the property, is where they're standing, the 2.87 acre property, looking kind of towards Baker Street and also 3rd Avenue. This is a view that's looking straight towards Baker Drive from the back of the property, which if you went back a little further, you'd drop off into the river. And this is a street view looking straight towards Knightsbridge Road, if you could keep going and go on through to Knightsbridge on Baker. And so you go a little bit further and you would end up in the residential neighborhood. Although this street is now one way coming towards us, you can't go the other direction. There's a sign that stops you from doing that. So it basically is a dead-end street from that going this direction. This is a site plan that was presented in the whole packet of drawings that you have the roll up on the dais there. But this is the most important aspect. It's kind of small for looking at here, but basically they're showing the 50 by 50 leased area on the overall 2.87 acre industrial zone tract. And when they look for sites for cell towers, they need to find willing sites where the property owners are willing to lease an area to them. And not only that, probably need to negotiate the location on that property that the property owner is willing to lease. And one thought to keep in mind with that is that the property is zoned for industrial use and is being fully utilized. There's all sorts of large vehiculars and trucks and equipment that are in the backyard of this particular property. And I believe that one of the reasons that it's located where it is, besides the property owner probably designating where he was willing, is the ease of access to the site without disturbing the rest of the property, because it's got gates that are proposed right off of North Baker Drive. The gates that they're proposing to the leased area required them to close an existing gate to this property that was just a few feet to the north there. And that is proposed on the site plan and part of their application to be closed, so that we don't have too many driveways close together. This particular driveway isn't going to be a particular busy one. They've indicated that they're only going to have an unmanned site, and that there would only be, in normal circumstances, a once-a-month visit by probably 1, maybe 2 technicians that would spend a couple hours maintaining the facility and checking it out. Even though that's the case, staff has proposed in the staff report that we require a full paved driveway and approach to this, which was not proposed as one of the conditions of approval. On the site of the leased site, they've cited the tower itself right dead center, and that makes it approximately 25 feet from the Baker Drive right-of-way line and approximately 25 feet from the south property line, which is where the next nearest industrial building is located. There are no setback requirements in the ordinance, particular in this zoning district, to buildings or to cell towers. I've often heard 15 years ago when cell towers were starting to proliferate that it'd really be nice to set them back in case one fell over, it wouldn't block a street or fall on a house. Well, that's long past that we have that luxury, and you'll find cell towers well within close proximity to structures all around. And they do require to undergo a building permit. Should it be approved, it would require a building permit and be whatever the building code wind load requirements, and all of that will be assessed to be able to obtain that building permit. And so from that standpoint, it helps assure their structural safety for the area just as much as any other building would by evaluation of our building codes. One of the requirements of this application was to hold a neighborhood meeting, and they did so. I did not attend, but they are required to provide the minutes, which are in your packet from that, and they have a list of attendees from that. A couple of the issues that came up, actually, there were several issues, but one that I remember of one concern is that there's a lot of large trucks going in and out of the adjacent Johnson Controls, and that what if one of those trucks should accidentally veer off and run into the tower? And of course, that would be a horrible situation. My response in the staff report was that the first, I guess, block of that causing a problem is the secure chain link fence that is around this facility. The other is simply that, maybe the tower would be a little bit more of a problem, but we have buildings that have people inhabiting and office uses that also trucks could run in to as well. So I'm just not sure if there's much more response we can give to that, but certainly we wouldn't want to see anything happen. And so I'm mentioning it because it was a concern at a neighborhood meeting. There's some sort of ballards or something that could be placed at the base or outside the chain link fence or inside of it to prevent something like that. That's something you may want to think about. I also talked about concerns about interfering with communications or your televisions or your radios, those kind of things, and the applicant has addressed that in his submittal, and they certainly comply with the FCC requirements. And there's information that was supplied that indicates there's a question about people are always concerned about the emissions of the radio electromagnetic waves or whatever it is. I'll forget. But there is information that indicates when you have a freestanding telecommunication system that isn't on a building, that's on a tower, as this one is, that once you get above 33 feet above the ground, it's pretty much excluded from, it automatically meets the emission requirements. And so I thought that was a relevant fact that I found interesting because I certainly have concerns about that as well. But it's the FCC that guides and regulates the emissions concerns, and their registered radio frequency engineer did submit information saying that they fully comply with that aspect. A couple of the application features, the chair already mentioned some because our agenda heading was so long, but it is a 50 by 50 lease site, 2.8-acre tract on light industrial zone. It's 100-foot tall, 104-foot tall because of the 12 8-foot long mounted antennas that are up at the top. And I mentioned the 25-foot setbacks from the property boundaries. It has concrete pad-mounted equipment cabinets that are down below at the base, and they're situated at the back of the leased area, away from the road. And they have an emergency backup diesel generator on site. And I did ask about that, and it only operates once a month for a short period of time to test it, and during an emergency. So it's not something that's would normally be, impacting the neighborhood, other than possibly that point of once a month testing to make sure that it's still working. We talked about the chain link fence, and they indicated in the application they're matching an existing chain link fence that's across the frontage of the property around the industrial site right now, and then completing that around their complete lease site. And it's actually a requirement that they make sure that it's restricted, that you can't, there's no chance of kids climbing in or getting into it. Because it's a restricted site, there is warning signs that they're going to post on the outside of the gate that talk about the potential danger of the radio waves or whatever that those things emit. And so it's probably a good thing that they have barbed wire on the top. Normally, we would not be thinking that way. That's one of the reasons it's probably good to see these things go into industrial districts rather than in an actual residential zone, because of that protective. I've seen them out in the countryside, and they all have barbed wire out on the outside protecting them.
So let me, we have people both pro and con that want to speak today, so let's try and get to the approval criteria.
Sure.
And staff's review of what's been presented that goes just to the approval criteria or not.
They end up,
So we can-
it's going to be an unmanned site. I mentioned the gate that's going to be on it directly from Baker Drive. There's, staff actually requested that they construct it with the ability to accommodate 2 future antenna carriers, and so they would be at a lower height than what's shown on the tower itself. They're taking the primary spot at the top. They're proposing a landscape buffer just inside the fence on either side of the gate, with the intent of, it's about 10 foot wide, to help screen the view from Baker Drive. And they will also be doing that by inserting slats into the chain link fence to provide a screening. The ordinance I mentioned before does indicate this as a preferred zone, but because of the antenna height and the proximity to the residential zone, that is why we're reviewing a site and design review and a conditional use permit for this particular case. Some of the recommended site requirements that staff made are dealing with the revised site plan that would more clearly delineate where that buffer zone is, especially if you take a suggestion of staff to slightly enlarge it from what it is. Where the gravel surface that's out there now on most of the site exists, and where it's going to be retained versus where the grass is going to be retained. And then if they do that, it will, solidify what staff's belief is that they fully meet the landscape ordinance requirement. But it was a little hard to get to that because the map really isn't showing us exactly what surfaces on the 50 by 50 lease site are going to end up being. Their narrative pretty much describes it, but the site plan doesn't show it well. We've made a condition of approval to recommend an irrigation system for the landscape buffer area. Although we get rain in Oregon, it typically takes 2 years to get new plant material established. They've said in their submittal that there will be no potable water to the site. So I'm not sure how they're going to keep their landscaping alive. We'll let them indicate if they have an alternative of hauling in water on a periodic basis or something to that effect, or whether there's some potential that they can bring water from the existing building on the site in order to establish or avoid the actual irrigation, since they're not planning any water, sewer, only electric and telephone, to my understanding, to the site. We also, and then I mentioned, we thought maybe it would be worth considering expansion of the landscape buffer area just a little bit along the north edge that heads west into the property, because you would be able to see that side from the North Baker Drive. And that's if we don't believe the slats of the fence are doing an adequate screening job. This buffer of plant material just inside the fence could help screen those cabinets from view from the street. And then I mentioned the condition for an on-site paved driveway and approach for a single car parking space and drive that this site would need. So that pretty much sums up the staff recommended conditions. The others are mainly procedural in nature. And that's the end of the staff report.
I have a couple questions for you to get started off. There was some commentary in the staff's recommended findings about the lack of consideration of other alternatives. Is it staff's position in this record that basically they hadn't presented any other alternatives, or just that they weren't very thorough in any
No,
presentation?
basically that it's not thorough enough, because at a minimum, I would have thought they would have mentioned the fact that they seriously considered siting this tower on public property, which is a desirable thing by our ordinance, which would be at the far end towards the highway behind the police building, and went to quite some measures exploring that site. We never did hear really why they chose not to move in that direction. But I thought I would mention that tonight, because it's not presented in their information that they did look at that. But they did present other information related to evaluating other sites and found them not to be close enough or high enough to accommodate their capacity improvement objective, as they put it.
No, also in here it talked about stealth designs. Are these, am I right in thinking that those are the ones, some of them look like fake trees, and some of there's
Yeah.
other ways to do these things?
That's
Is that what
right,
stealth
and there's
designs
some
mean?
very interesting ones if you click on the internet and search them out. And we did talk about stealth designs at the pre-application meeting. The applicant did indicate to us that they have done some, that they are always much more expensive, and that the long-term maintenance is of concern as well when they do those, and so it does cost the applicant more to do them. That's the only comment they really made.
Then there was a couple of comments in the proposed findings about color, and then in the proposed conditions, there's condition number 10 that talks about the color should be agreed to by the planning commission. Did you have some sort of procedure for us deciding that at a later date, or why would we have a condition where we come back later and approve some kind of a color?
Basically, that's there because they're not proposing to paint it, I guess would be what it is. The FFA, if it needed to be reviewed by them, oftentimes will require a certain paint color.
FFA only likes
But
pig
it's-
pink, I think, or sheep white.
Yeah, well, and they're not even required.
The FAA. FAA. Okay.
Yeah,
Pardon my bad humor.
yes, exactly. They're not proposing to paint it, so
Okay, so
I'm
they're not proposing any paint,
No, and,
but it says it has to be the same as the buildings that are next to it, but there aren't any buildings or structure that are attached to it. There aren't any buildings that are attached to it, so that's where you're looking for
yeah,
us to clarify.
I think it's just something that if there is public testimony or concern on your part that it needs to be a certain color, that's why that condition's there, to let you
Okay.
know that is a reasonable thing to do, I think, if it's of concern.
So we need to amend that tonight if that was then a
Right.
condition that we wanted to approve.
Right.
So it's not a later decision. Okay. Any other commissioners have questions for Mr. Brown? Before. Okay, let's then next hear from the applicant. Just for your reference, it's about 1 after, so you'll have till 46 if you need it.
Conrad Heil with Black Rock for Verizon Wireless. I'm not sure if you need the address, they've written it down here.
Let's see, is that at 5430 Northeast 122nd Avenue in Portland, Oregon?
That's Verizon's address, that's applicant, I'm a agent, would be 22135 Southwest Cole Court in Tualatin, Oregon.
Great, thank you.
And Jim Jaggers on behalf of the applicant Verizon Wireless. My address is 1100 Melody Lane, Suite 139, Roseville, California.
Okay, go ahead.
Just wanted to first of all thank the Planning Commission and the staff for the report and their consideration tonight. I did want to respond to, thanks, Brian's pulling up some of my exhibits. And this is fine, if we can start here, it's fine. It's basically a zoom-in shot of the city zoning map of the area. And I did want to just point out that oh, okay. And I think I can scroll through here. So this is just the site plan showing the location in the, generally in the southeast corner. This is a zoom-in area of the zoning map of the location we're at. Not sure if this has a pointer on it or not, but so our subject property is right there. So the Verizon search parameter was basically this area, which is included in the application packet, but I don't believe it's loaded on the screen. And the staff talked about this 660-foot radius where there might be a less onerous process for these type of facilities. But in this particular part of town, with the light blue being all the light industrial, the really light yellow to the north and west, and then the orange is the high-density residential to the east and south, there really isn't an opportunity, what either was a separate exhibit. So it's basically that same map with a series of 660-foot radius circles from the exterior points, basically showing that the entire area would be subject to site design review, and I believe staff already discussed about the 100-foot tower. Per Verizon RF, and it's in the application packet, the 100-foot tower height dictates centerline 100-foot antenna, which requires 104-foot antenna tip height. So it is slightly over the requirement, which triggers the conditional use. So that's why we're here before you today.
Let me stop you for just 1 second. You're
Sure.
just getting on a roll. But I looked through this thing pretty thoroughly, and I didn't see this overlapping map in our packet in the record. And if you're going to be presenting anything to us that's not in our packet, it needs to be in the record so that any opponents can review it
Sure.
for purposes of
And I
having a
have
complete record.
a copy. I can send additional copies if needed.
Yes, tonight by the,
That'd be great.
yeah, we need to have
I can
that.
submit that however you prefer, by
Okay.
mail or electronically. Let's just call it a 600-foot radius study.
Sorry, but go ahead.
Sure. So, and then generally, I'll respond to a couple of points in staff, so I just wanted to address that one issue. So, and then reiterate, yes, we're here before, there are no tall towers or other tall structures sufficient height to meet the coverage objective. The public property to the south, near the police station, is a lower topographically, and it's near a floodplain, so it was deemed by Verizon to have some less valuable characteristics for a structure. In addition, we do have reached an agreement, lease agreement with the property owner, and it is in the preferred industrial location. And we have analyzed it and determined that there are not environmental impacts on the property, whereas we are not positive about floodplain and other issues which may be evident on the public property. Some general responses, FCC license, you mentioned about that. So the FCC will issue a license in the market, not necessarily specifically naming a city. They're typically issued by a BTA market or a county, but those will give broad rights over a geographic area, which would be inclusive of the city of Canby, and if further clarification is needed with staff, we can explore that. One point, and I don't know if this was in the initial application or not, but just as a kind of a note regarding the FCC. And in 2010, cell towers and wireless communication facilities were declared critical infrastructure of the United States by presidential proclamation. So Homeland Security is very sensitive, and they want the carriers to have a good network. And folks, when they're in trouble and needing to call a cell phone, if they're in an accident or what have you, do depend on 911 emergency service for their cell towers. So Verizon is citing this for their benefit of their customers, but also they're required by law to allow federal communication and 911 facilities to locate antennas to serve the public benefit. So they do serve a great public benefit as well. There's some questions. Again, in the application, a interference study with the RF report is submitted that shows compliance with the FCC, and the emissions are well within compliance with federal guidelines. The tower is structurally designed to handle up to 2 additional carriers, future co-locators. And that gets to another point. I think you were asking some questions regarding stealth design. One other limitation of a stealth design, whether it be a tree or what have you, is that it generally does truly limit the opportunity for future co-location from a visual impact situation. So if you have a fake tree or what have you, that means you're going to have more antennas and less fake tree. So at some point it becomes obvious that this is not a tree, it's truly you get a hybrid situation, which is probably not the ideal visual impact. Regarding colors, typically these towers are, like all the ones that are existing in town today, are just natural finish galvanized steel, which tends to blend with Oregon's gray skies for the most part. If there's a color that staff or planning commission feels appropriate, we'd be happy that that's immaterial. If it's determined that it's a better color that is less impactful, that would be fine.
Canby's known as the garden spot of Oregon, you know that. So we prefer flowers.
Dahlia pink, I think, is
Dahlia,
the-
yeah, Dahlia would be fine.
That would be colorful, yes. My only comment on my training is in landscape architecture regarding landscaping. It is possible to, it is a little more onerous, but it is possible to put a condition that either manual watering or some provision is made for irrigation. Jim may be able to speak to that. It might be an opportunity to provide irrigation. Generally, my comment would be we prefer just to have a solid opaque fence, if that would satisfy the screening condition in lieu of any landscaping due to the maintenance obligation. But I understand it's a code requirement, so we're happy to comply and provide whatever provision is necessary, whether hand watering your truck or some agreement or, bonding for the plant material to ensure their survivability.
Let me ask you a question further on that, if you can, for a minute. Because one of the ways you were getting around the landscaping requirement was there was a certain percentage that was grass, which I'm not entirely sure how you would propose to keep grass here green based on just irrigation. So I think there have to be some sort of a watering plan to keep that grass alive and green.
Yeah, to me, it would say one or the other. Either go with a total solid site obscuring fence and no landscaping, or expand to a more tree shrub based, no grass. I don't really understand, to be honest with what the value of the grass is. It's not, obviously not going to give any screening value, so I would say go with a more tree and shrub expanded buffer and have a provision for providing a way to water those. I don't know if anything else, so I'd defer to Jim if you have any other points specifically you want to.
I don't have anything to add at this time.
But we're happy to answer any other questions.
Are you, do you know how far this site is from the Malala River?
I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure if it's shown on our plans or not. Is there, what's the reason for the question?
Well, I guess I live a distant, not, I live on the other side of Knight's Bridge towards the Dahlia Farm.
Okay.
And so, but not that far from North Baker Drive on the other side. I mean, because that's where our current state senator and U.S. representative live. So it's a dead-end street. But I've lived there for 20 years, and within the last year, I've noted that there are some nesting bald eagles that fly up and down that river. I am concerned about how this 104-foot tower is going to affect those bald eagles. And I looked through our codes and things like that. I could find nothing that really fairly represented my concern here, which was the avian population and how that was going to affect them, particularly those bald eagles. And so, and I didn't see where that was addressed in here, nor did I think that you would have. But
I don't think it's a city requirement. However, all cell towers under federal law are required to prepare an environmental report, which is submitted through SHPO and a NEPA report, which will, if there's a habitat issue, they'll coordinate with the ODF, Oregon Department of, if it's within a noted habitat area or nesting, they would be required to jump through the parameters of that. And I don't know if
There wasn't anything that was brought forth through the due diligence that has occurred to date. And then another little specific is that the gentleman that owns this property, the company is a construction company, there's routinely 120-foot cranes that are on the property.
but not as permanent structures. Now, I understand that they're there, but sometimes they're not there.
There's a very tall, yeah, and there's a very tall flagpole that's very nearby also.
I have seen that flagpole. I see it from many miles away. So, yes, I understand that.
Okay.
But I think that you can see my concern. That I would be very concerned about how this would be affecting those bald eagles. So, just to put that out there.
Right.
And if that has to trigger some sort of environmental statement, then so be it. But I'd rather see, I think we need to take that into consideration.
Okay, any other questions for these gentlemen?
Yes.
Mr. Sirleck, go ahead.
I have a question about the backup generator. I assume it's going to be diesel powered, and is that going to be muffled?
I don't know if this particular location, so typically they are, but I don't know what the specification is. I'm not sure if you know.
I don't remember what the specification of this particular.
And I believe it's, again, in an industrial zone, and all the adjacent properties in this location are industrial zone. So there will be some noise emitted, but I can't answer, I don't know for sure the specification for the model that they're selecting. I don't believe they'd be opposed to a condition requiring to be a muffled style.
I don't think it'd be an issue when it's being tested monthly, but should we have a power outage over an extended period of time, that thing running 24 hours a day, I think that could be an issue then with people in the area.
I know they're required to comply with state DEQ standards for noise emissions. And then typically then if that triggers some other specific model or other separate enclosure, they would comply with that. But I'm not positive in this particular case.
Okay. Along that same measure, do you happen to know, is the fuel tank going to be above ground or below ground?
So it's a contained, double-walled steel, self-contained belly tank, which is integral to the unit. And then each site is also another level of containment outside that for protection of the environment.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now, we have at least two other proponents. These individuals signed up, speak in favor. Oh, Mr. Jim Jaggers, you just spoke,
Yeah.
correct? Okay, so we will not use you again. And we have Mr. Conrad Heil.
Yes.
That was you also, okay. Those are the applicants. You guys don't normally have to fill them out. That's
Oftentimes
okay.
they ask us to fill them out, so we just fill them out.
That's fine, that's fine. Okay, is there any other individuals that would like to speak in favor? Now's the proponents' time. Would like to speak in favor of us approving this application. Okay, not seeing any other proponents, we will next move to opponents. The first on my stack of opponents would be Mr. Randy Tessman. And reminder, you all have 5 minutes.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, Planning Commissioners, I'm Randy Tessman. I live at 601 North Baker Drive in Canby, which would be right down the street in line of sight of the new cell tower. A couple of things that I've had issues with the industrial park for years has been trucks. And trucks, even though we have large signs in our area that they're not supposed to come down the street, continually come through our neighborhood and have taken out my so-called security fence about 3 times. So one of the things that I notice about this particular site is that we have trailers being parked right across from where this is going to be located, on the street at Johnson Control. We also have an entrance and an exit for Johnson Control just within the near vicinity. One of the things that is noted, and the reason for the conditional use, but was not really brought up, not all adjoining properties to the site are industrial. There's a residential property as well within a 350-foot area from this site. I know that a lot of municipalities take a look at cell tower placement. On this particular one, we're talking about 25 feet from the property line, the Baker Street Drive property line. A lot of municipalities look at the height of the cell tower and make a setback based on the height of the cell tower for very good reason, that if the cell tower for any particular reason does topple, it doesn't interfere with traffic, there's no injuries, there's no damage to adjoining properties. The placement of this one so close to the street, to me, is something that I think you need to really take a serious consideration, because as approval, it could actually fall back on the city if anyone were ever to get injured if the cell tower actually were to collapse. Another thing about this particular site, we're all aware of it over there, is that we have really good sandy loam soil. I've seen sandy loam trees that would have a firm rooting system that are close to 75 to 100 feet actually fall over in this kind of soil. So I want to make sure that if this is placed, that it actually does have a firm foundation, and maybe not just because of the wind, but because of earthquakes as well. When we talk about this area where this is actually going to be placed, we talk about it as an industrial area, but it is utilized by a lot of the residents, kids riding to the skate park, people driving to and from their places of work. I think one of the comments that I originally heard in the pre-meeting was that people just didn't like the particular side of this. And I have to think about our neighborhood, that we do keep our yards up very nice. I personally have an agreement with Jerry Nelson here with the city that I will maintain the public right-of-way there. The industrial park, however, it does not have a very pretty right-of-way, and to see the cell tower placed so close to the street actually just adds another eyesore to an industrial park that's not very well kept up. So those are my comments.
Let me ask you one question, Mr. Testman, if
Yeah.
you care to answer. I don't know if you do. How close would you estimate that the actual physical placement of the tower, the base, will be to the closest residentially zoned property?
I think it's like 350 feet. It's right in an adjoining property to them. Maybe.
Probably less than 3.
Well, it probably is
That's
3.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to see what it was there. Is there any other questions for Mr. Testman?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we had signed up Mr. Job Kaka? Chachka. Okay.
You wouldn't have got it.
Somebody forgot an H in there. I would have had it.
You know what, they didn't add that back in the day when they came over from the old country, so. My name is Job Chachka. I live at 620 North Baker Drive. One of the neighbors of Mr. Testman here, and hang on just a second here, I can't think and talk at the same time. Okay, so the proposed cell tower location I found very interesting, as it seemed to me, as Mr. Testman already testified, that we're in a very sandy loam soil there. One of the concerns I had at the previous meeting was that when earthquakes happen, there's a effect called liquefaction. We're talking about putting a slab of concrete on top of sand that is known to liquefy during earthquakes. My main concern is that it's really close to their street. I'd be surprised if it wouldn't land on the street and also take out some structure on the other side of the street because of its height. One of the concerns that we've heard today is that we would put up some type of landscaping barrier to kind of alleviate the sight of the cell phone tower and its adjacent structures. But I would doubt that landscaping would be 105 feet tall to screen it from my front porch. And I think that would be a major concern, especially in its close proximity to the residential neighborhood. One thing that we have between the industrial park and our neighborhood is a buffer zone that's supposed to be, I forget the exact size, but you could check. It's been talked about in many planning commission meetings before. And that buffer zone is required by law to be there. Well, that buffer zone is not maintained. It's not maintained by the ownership of the buffer zone. And so there is nothing that screens us from that particular industrial site. I do like the industrial park. I think some of the neighbors are really good, some of them. However, in Ward construction, the the leaseor in this case, I believe, they have been a very good neighbor in the past. It's been mentioned that there are typically tall cranes in that particular lot. You know what? Those cranes come and go. It's not a permanent structure. And it's not something that we would normally see. Another concern I have about a tall permanent structure that's 104 feet tall is that the FAA requires lights on a lot of these things. No mention has been made of that. So my concern is I'm going to have this blinking light coming in my window at night. So I think that would be something to be very important to find out. The other thing that I have 2 little boys, and I'm still not convinced that the FCC really knows what the health concerns and what the long-term effects of those radio waves are. And so I think the further away from the street, the further away from the residential neighborhood, the better it would be for all of us.
Any questions for the gentleman?
In reading through the packet of information, I think that the lighting issue actually was addressed,
Okay.
that the neighbors had expressed concerns about the lights, and that the applicant has agreed that there would be no lights on there, on this tower. I think that that is what they agreed to.
My question to the chairman then would be, is that something that has been approved by the FAA? Because they're the ones that actually follow up that approval. And my understanding is isn't there a helicopter landing pad right in an adjacent property or 2 properties over?
Well, to address a couple of those, first, we aren't, to answer the last part first, it's not our job to provide all the facts and everything for everybody.
Certainly, yeah, okay.
But with respect to the first part of your question, it has been addressed in there, and I think the Department of Aviation had said it did not fill the criteria to require the FAA light, and therefore no light would be required.
Very good,
I think
thank
is
you.
what-
I wasn't aware of
If I'm
that.
recapping properly. Any other questions for the Mr. Chachka? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Are there any other opponents?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Feels funny sitting over here. I'm Lainey Thaus. This is Ray Lawrence. We live at 517 North Baker Drive, which is right next door to the proposed cell tower. I just want to say we agree with everything everybody said, because it is true. And I guess for us, the biggest thing is the visual blight. We already deal with being right, we're the only house right there in that corner, as you can see on that little triangular shape next door to Ward Baker Properties. I guess for us, besides that, is the dust issues with the traffic that goes in and out of there, because it was one, when they built back in, I think it was 2007 or 8, they did not pave. So they're totally unpaved, and like Johnson Controls, they're all paved, so we won't get much dirt from them, but from this site we do, so paving would be good. And the other thing is to have maybe a flagpole, make it look like a flagpole. I mean, I could probably live with that, but we already know that our property values are going to suffer. So.
Any questions for Laney? Okay.
Yeah, well, this is the second thing, other than it's been made a one-way street. So it's the second hit on the property that lowers the value.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, if it goes in, or whatever, I'd like to see it like a big arborvitae, and have arborvitaes in front of it, because everything else around there's got arborvitaes, and it'd blend in. Paint it green or something.
Okay. Are there any other opponents that would like to speak against the application? Is there anyone that's neutral or just had, see some rumblings. Are you an opponent or a neutral? Should we log you down as?
I'm an opponent.
Okay.
I'm Linda Sue Spencer. I live at 925 Northwest 6th Avenue.
Let me see if I can help get that microphone so they can get you on TV here.
We're actually about a block away, but still within visual distance. We have seen a whole lot of truck traffic through our part of 6th and taking out the corner on Baker Drive with all the things that are going on. And the city has just put in a pedestrian path, bike path around part of that area. We use it all the time for pedestrian traffic and for bicycling. I walk every day around that corner. So I'm really kind of concerned about the traffic issue with the tower, as much as all of the other things everybody else has said.
Okay. Is there any questions? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Are there any other opponents? Okay, is there anyone that wants to speak neutral? Okay, applicant, you have your 10-minute rebuttal.
Connor Heil, once again. I'll just respond